Here, I think it was like 2 years ago he came out.
So, yeah.
So some students were actually in here. So Arshdeep was here, Daryl was here, Aaron, Joey, Ian, and Max were in this class when he first presented. I think they were in grade 10 at the time. So it might be kind of neat for you guys to see how things have evolved or sorry, Arsh, not Arshdeep, sorry. Just give you a little bit of background on Carla because I know she's going to talk about a few things. She was actually nominated for the top 40, or is it Manitoba's Futures? Top 40 under 40, right?
Yeah.
And last year you also won the Canadian Financing Forum Startup Showcase. Yeah, so a lot of fantastic things and recognition here in Winnipeg, and that's kind of nice that you are here, you're developing apps, and it seems to be going really well for you. Carly, it's amazing anytime that we ask her to do something, she's always very, she's the first one to reply back. I'd love to come out and talk to you guys, talk to your students, and give back to the community, which is fantastic. Thank you so much. Carly was also part of the advisory committee when we first pitched, when Mr. Ali Budbud, Mr. Erickson, and I pitched the idea about interactive digital media framework to the province. We had to get feedback from people in the industry. And if it wasn't for people like Carly and Project Whitecard and Complex Games, this framework wouldn't be set up, and this partnership with Vancouver Film School wouldn't be set up as well. So I want to thank you very much for coming in and talking and allowing us to set up this framework. Thank you very much, Carly. And at this point, I'm going to turn it over to you. You're on.
Thank you. That's such a nice introduction. Hi, guys. Thanks for having me. I always love coming out here and meeting students from Sisler. You guys are always awesome. And so we'll keep it really casual this morning. I'll tell you a little bit about Kindoma, which is my company, my startup. We make apps. And a little bit about my career path. And then we'll get into what's involved in making an app, and then I'd love to see what you guys are working on. So I thought I'd start by showing you a little demo video because it tells you a little bit about Kindoma better than I can. So that's my husband and my daughter in that video. If you guys ever have a startup or work for a startup, you'll see you tend to recruit all the people in your lives to do different things and help you out. So at Kindoma, we make apps that help families connect when they can't be together, families with young kids. We allow kids to do things like reading or drawing over video chat. So you can sort of think Skype for kids with an interactive twist. So usually when I start talking about Kindoma, maybe I'll put on, Jamie, how would I put on this presentation?
Okay, I'm going to switch to
Okay,
B.
perfect. So generally, whenever I tell people about Kindoma, I think one of the biggest mistakes that a lot of people make when they're just starting out and especially in the app space, is they start by talking about their product and all the features of their product. So a lot of people might stand up here if they were telling you about Kindoma and they'd say it's video chat and you have books and you have 250 books and you can point to where the other is pointing and you can see where the other is pointing, you can do dialogic reading, and really all of that's going over your head, because the first thing you have to figure out when you're doing an app and when you're pitching your idea for your app is what's the problem that you're trying to solve. Take away the technology, take away whether it's iOS or Android or what you're going to do, and just what's the problem. This is a little bit different if you're making a video game or a game-based app, but generally for most apps, it's what's the problem that we're trying to solve. So at Kendoma, our problem is that families around the world struggle with distance. So whether it's grandparents who live away from their grandchildren, parents who travel for work, military families, people who live away from their biological parent because of separation, divorce, or other reasons. And the truth is current solutions fall short. So phone conversations, I know most of you probably have not had a phone call with a 3-year-old, but you probably don't want to. They're pretty much a disaster. They rarely last more than 2 or 3 minutes. In reality, video chat is better, things like Skype and FaceTime, but still very short. And the reason for that is because young kids don't want to chat, they want to play. And so when you picture what you're doing in the real world, if you're with a 3 or 4 or 5-year-old, you're probably not having a conversation. So why would we expect them to be able to do that over things like Skype? And so that's the problem that we at Kendoma are trying to solve. And so to tell you a little bit about my background, myself and my partner have actually been working on solving the problem of remote family communications for over 5 years now, although not only at Kendoma. So I actually met my partner, my business partner, Tico. I was living in New York working at Sesame Street, and I'll tell you guys a little bit about how I ended up at Sesame Street. But I was in New York at Sesame Street, and Tico, who's a computer scientist, was at Nokia Research Labs, developing communications technologies. And we were staffed on a research project under Sesame Street's Military Families Initiative, aimed at understanding how to use video chat to help parents connect to help families connect when a parent is deployed. And so on that research project, this was pre-iPads, Skype was really just becoming mainstream. We found that adding a shared activity like book reading helped Skype calls or made Skype calls go from an average of about 3 minutes to an average of almost 20 minutes. So again, because young kids don't want to chat, they want to play. So from a research perspective, this was a groundbreaker. But Tico, my business partner, my now business partner, and I worked on the research project, sort of went our separate ways. He went back to Nokia, I went back to working on what I was working on at Sesame Street. And then we didn't reunite until a few years later. So I'll tell you more about that as I get into Kendoma, but maybe I'll stray for a minute now because people usually ask how I ended up working at Sesame Street. So my background, I have an undergraduate degree in commerce, Bachelor of Commerce, and in finance and marketing. And after getting my undergrad degree, I went to work in, my first job was at a big consulting company doing management consulting. And I didn't like it. I very quickly realized I didn't like it. And so I sort of stopped and thought, okay, I really like business, like I like marketing. I also had always thought maybe I want to be a teacher. So what's something that I can do that might be in a field that I'm more interested in? What kind of articles do I like to read in the paper? And I decided I wanted to work in something in the kids space. So at the time I was living in Toronto and I went to work at a toy company. I found a toy company in Toronto. And I ended up going to work there. And it's sort of interesting, I like to tell high school students this. So I had been in business consulting for about a year, not very long, I was right out of school. And the only job available at the toy company was as the assistant to the CEO. And so I sort of thought, I've been in business consulting, why do I want to be an assistant to the CEO? It felt like a step down. It was a step down, I would say, in a typical corporate structure, but it was the best thing I ever did because it got me into an industry that I wanted to be in, and I learned so much being in a junior role working for the CEO, and so it was a great move. And so I was at the toy company, and then while I was there, I realized that there was a lot of education in toys, but not a lot of people who necessarily had a background in education developing the toys. So I went back and I got my master's in education, and specifically technology and education, which is what led me to Sesame Street. So that's sort of how I got to Sesame Street story and how I met my now business partner, Tico. So fast forward to today, or fast forward, I guess, to 2 to 3 years ago. Tico and I hadn't seen each other for a couple of years, and a few things had happened. First of all, iPads and other tablets had come out, which totally changed the kids' media landscape, and generally totally changed the landscape in general. And I think it's very interesting. Sometimes in sort of the ebb and flow of product and digital products, something will come out that really changes everything. And I would put tablets in that category. Like, how many of you use a smartphone or a tablet? Right. So if I'd asked you that 6 years ago, you wouldn't have known what a tablet. 7 years ago, you wouldn't have known what a tablet was. So those, or if I'd asked you 7 years ago what's an app, you actually wouldn't have known. So those kinds of things are staggering when something like that happens. And they really end up opening a new industry and opening new opportunities. So tablets came out and totally changed the kids' media landscape. I also had moved home from New York, here to Winnipeg. My husband's from Winnipeg, I'm from Calgary. And I had 2 little kids. And I was traveling for my job, and there were so many times that I thought, now I really personally understand that problem that we found on that Sesame research project about young kids and having phone calls with them and having Skype calls with them. So I actually ran into Tico, who I'd worked with on the project at a conference, and he said, "Hey, Carly, I got the rights to our project. I broke off. I formed a company. I just started a few months ago. I'm looking for a co-founder. Do you know anybody?" And so I sort of thought, well, maybe this is a time for me to do the entrepreneurial thing. So that's a bit of a long story short, but that's how Tico and I reconnected, and that's how Condoma came to be. One thing to note, so Tico and I are, we work in different places. So we're distributed, what's called a distributed team. So I'm here in Winnipeg, and he's in Palo Alto, California, which, as you guys probably know, is where a lot of tech happens, and there's a lot of great talent in the computer sciences. And if he was standing here with me, which he was, because I know you guys would love to meet him, you could not imagine 2 more different people. He is a brilliant technologist. He can build anything, he can code anything. He's an amazing engineer. I, on the other hand, can't even, I can maybe write a line of HTML. You guys can all probably code better than I can. And so for me, one of the reasons that I'd always been interested in doing the entrepreneurial thing and developing my own digital media, whether it was a company or a content of my own, but without having that skill set, it's really important that you find a partner or a team member who has a very different skill set from you. And I find that it's rare that, it does happen that you'll meet people who were, buddies in school and very similar to each other and start a company and have success, but I think it's much more common to find people who are very different from each other. And I think that you guys, working in your projects now, probably each have your own different roles on the team, and that's a really good thing. It's much better than having a team of people who have the same skill sets, because then there's a lot more arguments and there's a lot less diverse talent. So anyways, back to Condoma. So we make video chat apps for kids. Our first and flagship app, Condoma Storytime, allows kids and their loved ones to read together over video chat. So you've got, not only are you seeing and hearing each other over video chat, but you have a library of books to choose from. And this shadow head is probably our most special feature. It allows you to see where the other side is pointing. So you could say, Sammy, what's that? Oh, that's a dog. Or Mommy, what's that letter? That's the letter A. And so it really does its best to simulate how young kids and their loved ones would read together if they were in the same place. We just soft launched our newest app, Condoma Draw Time, which I'm so excited about. It allows kids to do anything that they would with a pen and a piece of paper if they were in person, but over video chat. So you can play tic-tac-toe or hangman, you can practice your letters, you can draw a picture. And so it's taking the idea of what kids and their loved ones would do if they were together in the same place and enabling it over video chat. And so I'm not going to get into this too much, but we've won a lot of awards for our work, which is very exciting. This slide shows a little bit about the research project that we did at Sesame. So again, remember I said it was before iPads. So this is what we mocked up. It had a book, it had 2 phones that were Skyping together, and so you know, again, you can see when you look at a prototype like this, why it didn't make it to market. We would have had to build a whole piece of hardware. And so when something like a tablet comes out or something that really changes, you know, the way kids consume digital media or media in general, then it can open up a whole world of opportunities. Just some of our advisors and investors, which I don't think is that interesting. Yeah, I'll talk a little bit about this. So the response to Storytime after we launched it, our book reading product, was awesome. First, I think the thing that we're most proud of is that our calls average 12 minutes longer than Skype calls with a young kid. So what that shows is something that we refer to as engagement. And so, do you guys talk about engagement at all? Maybe?
Yeah.
It's like sort of...
I'm looking over at it too, so.
It's sort of based on the idea that people are actually going to use your app and how engaged they are, especially with game design, for example, if anyone's doing a video game. It's like, how into this are they? Are they coming back to play it every day or every week? Or are they playing it 5 times a day? You know, if you guys can think of something that you use a lot, that means you're very engaged in it. And so we've won some awards. We've gotten a lot of press, which is great. And like I said, we just launched our second app, Draw Time. And so now we're evolving from 2 apps to a whole ecosystem of apps. So at a very high level, that is Kendoma. Before I delve into the next part, which is, you know, I want to kind of talk you guys through the process of making an app. Does anyone have any questions about Kendoma or my background or anything? Yeah?
For the drawing chat thing, would it be like so both people can write and draw on it?
Exactly. So both people can write and draw from the separate sides. I actually have a demo video, but I'd have to connect back to this.
That's fine.
Find it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's great. I'd love for you guys to download it and try it out. It's a free app. Actually, no, it's not free this week. We're trying different business models. Never mind. Try it out in 3 weeks when it's free. And so, yeah, it's you. It literally is like a shared whiteboard with video chat.
You just queue it up.
The one in your
Sure. You have it?
Yes.
Always. Anyway, I'll show it to you when this switch is over. But yeah, so it's shared drawing. So both sides can draw together. So, you know, we can be coloring a picture together or again playing tic-tac-toe or something like that in a synchronous manner. So actually same time.
All right. Thank you.
You're welcome. Does anyone else have any other questions about anything related to Kendoma or me or Sesame or anything? Yeah? Good question, and yes, all the time. So first of all, I do travel for work quite a bit, and so I personally use it with them, and so does my husband when he travels. We also have grandparents who live out of the city, so they use it. Now my kids are funny. They think that they just have ownership or like the right to dictate what's in the app. So like my daughter says to me, with Draw Time we have about 8 colors in there right now. And then she's like, Mom, I want you to put pink on your roadmap. So I don't know if you guys know what a roadmap is, but it's all the features you're going to build into your app. And I'm like, well, first of all, why does my 5-year-old know the word roadmap? But second of all, you know, Paula, you can't just decide what's going to be an app. So she then will think in other apps that she can, you know, change the features or something like that. Because we do use our kids a lot as beta testers. And so, yeah. But I of course, I use it with my kids both as testers and just as a parent. It's a good question. And I think generally you have to, if the ideal scenario for me, because not only am I the developer of the app, but I'm also a user of it, in that, like, if I was making an app for, let's say it was for elderly people to help them remember to take their vitamins, that wouldn't be something that I would be a user of, right? And so it can be a little bit harder to know if you're kind of hitting the mark in terms of meeting a need. But for me, it is really great that I am a user of the product that I'm developing, but it's not always the case. I would say that that's the minority. You don't have to be developing an app for yourself that works for you. It could be for a totally different group of users, and that's just fine. Just need you to do a lot of talking to those users.
it's ready to go. If you want to play it, Carly, and then
Oh, sure.
yeah.
Here, I'll show you guys this. Amazing about the video call. So you can see that each, so the dad is on the other side, so I'm actually like doing it together. So that's an asynchronous feature. We also use Syndic. So that's just a little demo video. So what you saw in there was first the synchronous, you know, the tic-tac-toe or the coloring of the heart together. And then you saw what we call our asynchronous feature. So that's something new in draw time that at Condoma we didn't have in story time. And what we heard from our users after launching story time is, okay, I love your product, but there's a lot of times that I can't use it because time zone differences are a challenge, or I'm traveling for work and I have a meeting and I didn't have time to call my kid, or I don't have reliable Wi-Fi. And so with draw time, we decided to take what we heard from users, which is always the most important thing. You know, they're the most important people, your users, the people who will talk to you, who use your product or don't use your product, but wanted to use your product, and they'll tell you what they want. So what we heard people saying was, we want something that we can use when we can't video chat. And so we developed this sending a drawing, which fits nicely with drawing mechanism. So draw time has both the synchronous, the video chat, and the asynchronous, the not video chat modes. Yeah? Good question. So when I came here 2 years ago, it was just Tico and I, and neither of us were employees of the company, meaning we were bootstrapping ourselves. So that means that we hadn't hired ourselves yet. We were just had an idea. Now we are 3 full-time employees. So there's Tico and I, and then I think that one thing, going back to the team, because the team is the most important thing. So, you know, I can do marketing, I can sell, I have a background in education and research, Tico can develop, but neither of us are designers. So that was for sure the biggest talent that was missing, and so that was our first hire. So we have a full-time designer here in Winnipeg, Kevin, he's amazing. And then, so in addition to the 3 of us as full-time employees, we have 2 full-time developers on retainer as consultants, helping Tico out with building, and then we hire specialists for other projects. So we have a PR company that we hire when we need them, which we're using right now for a big initiative we have. And so it depends what else we're doing. We outsource our video to any video production to a company here called Handcraft. That's amazing. So yeah, so we've grown a lot. It's exciting. We have an office now downtown. We're in, there's a group called Startup Winnipeg. That's wonderful, and they have shared office space downtown, so we're there, which is with a lot of other startups, you know, kind of 2 to 5 person startups, which is nice because it can be lonely working as such a small team. So it gives you a bit of a feel of having a bigger team around you. Yeah.
How many books are in the Storytime app right now, and how many are available?
Sure. So we have about 250 books in the Storytime app. Yeah. And so our business model, which I'll talk to you a little bit about when we talk about how to make an app, is that it's a free app. Storytime is a free app. It comes with 10 free books. And then for a monthly subscription of $6.99, you get access to the entire catalog of 250 books. And so it's a good question. Getting books on our platform is challenging. We don't make books ourselves. Writing books and authoring books is another good example of something that you kind of sometimes have to decide. Is this something we want to do on our team, or is this something we want to try and find another way around? And for us, I think generally as a rule, if you can find someone else who already has something, it's better. Like we're not book authors or illustrators, so why reinvent the wheel in that case? That would take a huge amount of resources for us to create our own books. So we'd rather have relationships with publishers and then get their books on our platform. Yeah?
So far, the apps that you've shown us were solving problems of distance.
Yeah.
Will you solve any more problems or tackle any more?
That's a great question, and something we struggle with all the time. I love that question because it's about, again, going back to the idea of what problem are you solving. And so for us, it can be very easy for a company to try to bite off more than they can chew and try to solve a lot of different problems. So we will always be focused on distance communications and solving the problem of, kids and distance. That's where we live, that's our home base. But there are other places that we can stray within there that sort of tap into that same problem. For us, it's looking at different markets. So right now we've targeted the home. We get a lot of feedback about the school. So there's things like Skype in the classroom. And so we love to develop an app for the schools. And so it's a bit of a different problem. How do schools communicate and break down the four walls of their classroom, and how do they use video chat effectively? But it's sort of in the same space. Yeah, although, you have to be opportunistic. There's something, have you guys heard of the term a pivot for a startup? Yeah, so a pivot, it means you change direction of your company, and that usually means you're solving a different problem. So what will often happen when you hear about companies, and this, you could imagine, let's say Kindoma was getting a lot of feedback that we were being used by businesses for the shared whiteboard because they wanted a shared document with video chat. And then we were like, okay, we're not going to do family communications, we're going to do business communications. That would be a pivot, like that would be a change of direction for a company. We're solving a different problem in a different market with the same type of product. You're welcome. Yeah?
What's the general process of making your own company?
So the process of making your own company is generally, it depends. There's lots of different processes. Our process was that, we reconnected, we had an idea. Tico was able to build an MVP. An MVP is a minimally viable product, so it's sort of a shell. I'll talk a little bit more about that, but it's sort of your very first product. Not something that is necessarily beautiful, but something that can show what you want to do. And so generally, you first, people used to write business plans. In my experience, there's not a lot of business plan writing anymore. It's a little bit more of like being scrappy. It's called bootstrapping yourself. So if you can find a way to even build something or do something even while you're at your other jobs or even while you're at school, enough so that you can take it to potential investors or someone who's willing to invest a little bit of money in you if you need that startup funds. And then you can, there's lots of different ways to go about it. You have to incorporate or figure out what kind of corporate structure you want. And then you have to figure out how much time you have before, what's your business model and how much time before you're going to be making money to subsidize your company, and then you need to figure out how you're going to fund your company in that time period. So for us, it was investors, which is very common for startups, especially tech startups, and especially in somewhere like Silicon Valley, although it's becoming much more common in places like Winnipeg. There's a great angel community here. Angel investors are, wealthy individuals who want to invest in a risky type of startup business or something like that. And so you go and you pitch your idea. I have a deck and I go and I say, this is Tico, this is me, this is where, similar to what I just did, although obviously a little bit, different, but, we're looking for $100,000 to start a business. Very much like Shark Tank. Do you guys ever watch Shark Tank or Dragon's Den?
Yeah.
So it really is like that. You go, you pitch, and you are asking people to invest in you and in your company. That's how it works for us. Now, there's lots of different resources for young entrepreneurs, for Manitoba entrepreneurs. There's a group called Futurepreneur. Have you guys ever heard of that? It's a wonderful organization for young entrepreneurs looking to start a business. They even will give you loans that you don't have to personally back. And I think you probably do need somewhat of a business plan for that, but I don't think that's a very good answer. But it's, everyone's path is a little bit different. I would find, I think if I had one short answer to that, I would find an organization like Futurepreneur, specifically in Winnipeg. I would go to Futurepreneur and say, I want to start my business. This is my idea. How can you help me? And then go from there. Yeah?
How did you come up with the name Kindoma?
So that's a good question. People always ask that. Our name comes from the combination of two words. So in many cultures, kind is the word for child. So you can think kindergarten or kinder egg. And oma is for grandparent. So we're bringing together the child and the grandparent, Kindoma. I actually don't like our name. I'd love to change it, but anyway, sometimes you have to make decisions about like what you put your resources towards, and changing our name is not something we can do right now. But
What would you change it to?
I don't know. It's a good question. That's part of the problem. We don't have something really good. It's we've had trouble coming up with something else we like it better. I want something like more memorable and more easier to pronounce and to spell. If you have any good ideas, let me know. Yeah?
Do you have any future plans for your app?
Yeah. We have lots of future plans. So the biggest endeavor for us this holiday season, maybe you guys will help me, do you guys all have Twitter accounts? Maybe you guys will tweet this out for me on Friday. So we're launching what's called a crowdfunding campaign. Have you guys ever heard of crowdfunding? So crowdfunding is a really interesting thing. It's another really interesting way to fund a product. And so for us at Condoma, we are iOS only, meaning we're on Apple devices, iPads, and iPhones only. And we get a lot of people saying, when are you going to build on Android? I'm not an Apple user. I want to use your products. But because of the amount of money that we raised, so what we do, we look at the amount of money we raised, and we said, okay, how many months do we have before we need to start being cash flow positive, either from our revenues or raise more money? And so to do something like build an Android port is a very expensive endeavor. It would require either Tico and our tech team or the hiring of a new tech team. So it's sort of a big chunk on top of that. And we decided that with our funds that we've raised, we couldn't afford to build an Android port right now. And so that being said, we've often thought about crowdfunding and how, we're what's called a social innovation company, meaning that we're connecting families. There's a very nice sort of social impact to what we're doing. And so we've seen a lot of companies like ours be very successful with crowdfunding. So for this holiday season, we're going to be crowdfunding on a platform called Indiegogo, which is like Kickstarter, but more focused on digital and physical products, to try to raise money for our Android port and also as a marketing vehicle to get people aware of Condoma. So maybe you guys will, if I send you a tweet, maybe you guys will tweet that one on Friday. So we're launching on Friday.
Okay.
Would you do that?
Yeah, definitely.
Thank you. So anyway, so this holiday season for Condoma is the Indiegogo campaign, as well as a big push towards draw time. So we launched draw time. We did what's called a soft launch a couple months ago, which means we put it out there. We've been letting you. It's paid right now, which is interesting because compared to being free, a paid app will average around, when you're not featured or without any marketing support, like 2 to 3 downloads a day, whereas a free app will average, 150 to 200. And so we just want to get some early users in and understand what they were liking, what they weren't liking, where the problems were, where the crashes were. And then we're doing a big launch over the holiday season. And so that's what's next for us in the near term. In the longer term, we want to build a whole ecosystem of apps. So you can, again, we want to be sort of, instead of using Skype, instead of using FaceTime, we want to be the default way that young kids and their loved ones communicate, and then also delving into a new market. So we're thinking very hard about the school market, and we get a lot of feedback from teachers saying, I'm using your app, but I wish it did this, or I'd like to use your app. And so we're going to be trying to raise money to build an app for schools.
I have a couple ideas we're going to talk to you about after.
Great,
all right,
please. Yeah,
but,
I was just thinking about that. I was like, when we do that, maybe you can help me.
Because we have some really cool things coming up with different people out west.
Okay.
The question, on your site you have a new app that's being launched, and it's looking for beta testers. How does one become a beta tester? And can you talk about maybe what a beta tester is for the students?
Sure. So a beta tester is somebody who's able to use your app or your game before it's out there to the general public. And so finding good beta testers is probably one of the most important things that a young company can do, or a newer, company developing a new product can do. Because otherwise it's just you and your friends and family using your product or your app, and ultimately that's not a big enough audience. And so the key is vetting and finding the right beta tester. So if you did sign up on our website to become a beta tester, what you would then do is we would send you a survey and ask you a little bit about yourself. Which of these applies to you? Are you a grandparent who lives away from their grandkids? Are you a parent who sometimes travels? None of the above. How old are the kids in your life? When's the last time you used Skype or FaceTime? So, for example, for us, people might think, we're looking for people who don't use Skype or FaceTime. Well, that's not true. Because we're trying to solve the problem that those apps don't work well for young kids, we want people who do use them, right? So we want people who already fit into our use case, the use case being someone who sometimes uses video chat with the young kids. And then once we've vetted someone as a beta tester, what we'll do is we'll allow them to use the app before it's launched, obviously, without having to pay for it. And then we ask for their feedback.
Awesome. Thanks.
Yeah?
Are you looking for interns?
Oh, good question. Yeah, always. You can talk to me after. You can get my email address. I'm I'm always happy. You know, we, especially now that we're downtown in our new startup Winnipeg office space, I think that having an intern would be awesome. Are you looking for a summer job?
Yes.
Yeah?
How long does it usually take to make an app?
Great question, and the honest answer is it depends what kind of app you're making. So I would say anywhere from generally from ideation to actually having it out there. For us at Condoma, at this point, it will take about a year. It can definitely be shorter or longer depending on what you're doing and what size team you have, what you already made. But I think generally, you know, you need to go through a number of steps, and I'll talk about these. It's not just a matter of building something and putting it out there, although you can. I mean, there are people who might develop an app and put it out there in 2 weeks, but I generally don't know that those have been thought through properly, unless they're just pointing from another platform or something. And for us, it's about a year. So right now, we're working on something, we've been working on something for a couple of months that we'll probably launch in about 6 months from now.
Which app took longer to develop?
Good question. For sure, story time. And the reason for that is because a lot of the technology that we built for story time and a lot of the learnings are in draw time. So, so this might be a little bit hard to explain, but you know that shared pointing technology in story time? One thing Tico, my partner, realized was that like, oh, if I just added, if those were both inking, meaning leaving a mark, then you're drawing together. And that was sort of the basis for draw time. We're like, wait, we've built a lot of this already. And that's always a really great thing, that if you can take a lot of the assets and code that you've already done and apply it to the next thing you do, that's key. For us also, there's something called our funnel. Have you guys heard of a funnel? So pretty much every business has a funnel, which is the process or the funnel that a user goes through from the first time they've ever heard of Condoma until they're a user. So I hear about the app, I go to the web, I go to the app store, I download the app, I open the app, I create an account, I find someone to connect with. Then I'm a user, right? Then I can have a call. But I have to go through all of those steps before I can actually use the app. We have a particularly long funnel, something like Angry Birds, you just download and use it. So that would be a short funnel. Long funnels are challenging, and once you've sort of gotten people through your funnel, ideally you want to use it again. So with Condoma, once I've created an account and have someone to connect with, I have those same connections already in Condoma draw time. So we're able to reuse a lot of what we did for the first app with our second app. Your first app, I think, generally will often take you the longest time to build, unless you're just doing a real MVP sort of testing app, not something that you think is going to be your product, but something that you're just using more of as a basis to learn. Any other questions before I move on to this? So I thought I'd walk you through sort of very high level. These are the 5 steps that you go through when you're making an app. And the first, again, and I know I've talked about this a lot, but what's the problem? And so what's the problem you're trying to solve? And everybody, when they first start doing interactive digital media, always thinks about the solution. Like when I do these workshops, and even when we do these workshops with professionals, like we had New Media Manitoba, which is a great media group, which is a great group here, an industry group here in Manitoba, had a guy come in from Google and lead us all in a workshop about how to create an app. And again, like sitting in the audience, he said, what's the problem? And it was like about what's frustrating in a grocery store. And all of us immediately had ideas for apps like, oh, it would be so cool if this and this and this, or I wish that I could, send to my phone, blah, blah, blah. And he's like, no, what's the problem? Don't even think about technology. What's the problem? Is the problem that you're annoyed because of a long lineup at the grocery store? Is the problem that you forget your grocery list? What's the problem? And so it's much harder to do than you would think. And the other thing that you do in this sort of what's the problem stage is some user research and some surveys. So generally a survey at this stage, again, people always tend, and we do this too, you're going to go and survey 100 people. I want to ask them, do you like my idea, or do you wish that you had an app that did this? That's not what you're asking. You're asking, what was the most frustrating thing that happened the last time you X? For us, what was the most frustrating thing that happened the last time you had a Skype call with your grandchild? That's all. That's all we want to know. What is the most frustrating thing that happened to you the last time you were at the grocery store? What was the most frustrating thing that happened to you when you were on your way to school this morning? Right? So these are the kinds of questions you ask yourself when you're sort of coming up with what the problem is. So for us, when we went out and asked people, what was the most frustrating thing for you the last time you had a Skype call with your young grandchild? They kept pressing the big red hang-up button. So that came up a ton of times. They didn't stay in the frame. They didn't stay in the video chat frame. Like, I couldn't see their face. That came up a ton of times. We couldn't keep them engaged. They were bored. They were running around. They kept closing the app and wanting to play, their Disney app. So what you do is you do a survey, you get those responses, and then you code them. So people don't come, it's not like they're saying it that concisely, right? You sort of have to read them and then you code it into a bucket. So my kid kept hanging up on me, so that would go in the, press the hang up button kind of thing. My kid was bored, I couldn't keep them focused, I couldn't see their face. So we ended up with those 3 buckets, and so those are our 3 guiding principles at Condoma. Make a UI that does not make hanging up the most attractive thing to do. Make interactive. Kids want to touch the screen, right? They want to touch the screen. They will touch the screen. So what can we do to make that part of the interactive experience? No big red hang-up button. That's easy. Don't have a big red hang-up button. Keeping child in frame is much harder. We're still struggling with that one. And our designer Kevin's doing some brainstorming and has some good ideas that we're going to have to test around. Little animations that can go around your own. You know how on FaceTime, let's say you can see your own face and then you can see the other person's face. So we need to be able to remind the kid, hey, if you can't see your face, they can't see your face. So what kinds of, sparkles can we put around the video chat window to remind them that they need to be in frame? That's the one that we're still struggling with. And then engagement, of course, is the basis of everything. They need an activity to do together. So once you've sort of figured out what your problem is and what those are called pain points, like what are the pain points for the people that you're trying to reach? Again, this is all a little different for video games, but for apps that are meeting a problem or filling a need. Then these two sort of go hand in hand. You brainstorm about what might help, and this again doesn't have to be a technology-based brainstorm. So this guy from Google said that when they were doing this they're working on a grocery shopping app. This was just his example. And after doing that, what was the most frustrating thing last time you went to the grocery store? He actually went to the grocery store, and him as team members, and walked through the grocery store with people and were like, when they were having that problem, he would say, what would make this easier for you? What would you like right now? And it could be something that's totally impossible. Like, I would like it if a genie popped up on my shoulder and told me what was on my app. It's just sort of getting those ideas. I think the most important thing about a brainstorm is just that no idea is a bad idea. You really have to get all your ideas out there. There's always the person on the team. In our case, it's often Tico, and I understand why, because this is not an insult. It's very hard when you're the person who's going to be building it, and people are like, "Well, it'd be so great if we had 5 people in a video chat and la 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 la." And then he's like, "Well, I'm the one who's going to have to build this thing. Like, guys, that's not possible." But in a brainstorm, everyone needs to take off their realistic hats and put on their imagined, blue sky hats. The other stuff comes later. And then competitive overview. So this is also so important. You need to find every game or app or product in your space, and you need to use it. And so that can be very time consuming, but it's probably the best thing you can do. There's 2 things you're trying to do. First of all, what's your point of differentiation? What's different about Condoma than about UsTime, which is a competitor of ours, or than about Skype or FaceTime? What's different about my grocery shopping app than the 100 other grocery shopping apps that are out there? And then also you'll find that as you use other apps, you'll see different features and you'll get exposed to different ideas. It'll help you with your brainstorming because you'll usually, basically, every idea is an iteration of something else. There's very few net new ideas. The way I pitch Condoma is Skype for kids with an interactive twist. That's how most people will tell you, like when we've gone to pitch trainings and stuff like that, they'll tell you to pitch your product because ultimately people need a point of context. And so it's not that you're copying other people's apps, but it's just that you're understanding what's out there. There are things that are different, there are things that are net new, but...
Hello? She hung up. Sorry about that.
No problem, but it's rare. So anyways, competitive overview, and then paper prototype. So that's, I don't know, have you guys done like storyboarding, paper prototypes, that kind of stuff? So you're familiar with that.
Excuse me,
Yes?
is Janelle King there?
Mr. Who?
Janelle King?
Oh, Janelle. Yes, she is.
She comes to the office.
She's on her way.
Thank you.
Bye.
Sorry about that.
So the workshop, that Google workshop that I was telling you about, they do something very cool. So this was a 2-day workshop, and we've been doing this grocery shopping example. And so we were all in teams pretty similar to, you know, the tables that you're at now. And then he said, okay, everyone go off, you have 10 minutes, he set a timer. You have 10 minutes to put your idea for your app on paper. So that's after we've done all of this, and do it individually. So then everyone took 10 minutes, and I mean, of course you weren't coming up with something amazing or something, you know, that's fully thought out, but just getting your ideas. I'm gonna create an app that has grocery lists that, you know, automatically detects when things are, whatever it is. Then everyone had 2 minutes to pitch their app to each other. So you would pitch, 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 you would pitch. Then we came together as a team and we talked about it. We said, you know, I liked in, you know, Carly's idea, I like this feature, and, you know, Jamie's idea, I thought that this was kind of interesting. Then we go off, and then as a group, then you stick in a group, and then together you create your idea. So you sort of are taking, what you're doing there is you're seeing what was common in all of your apps. That's probably something that you gotta have there, right? You're taking the best of everyone's ideas and putting it together into one team idea. Then you could pitch it to everyone else in your class, right, as a group, or everyone else in your, whatever it was, like your workshop, and you can say, like, this is the idea that we came up with. And then you get feedback from those users. That's a little bit different than a paper prototype. A paper prototype actually, you can actually have people, quote unquote, play with it. So this is really good for UI, UX, onboarding. So you can put a shot of a screen in front of somebody and say, you know, you're trying to set up for Condoma, what would you press? And you can see where they struggle, where they hesitate. There's a lot of great UX research principles around this. I'm sure our designer Kevin would be happy to come talk to you. He does a lot of that. But it's probably one of the most important things that you can do. And then eventually you'll build your MVP, which stands for minimally viable product, which is exactly what it sounds like. It's the minimum that we can build to put something out there and see how people react. Have you guys heard of the lean startup movement or the lean product movement?
No.
So it's an amazing, amazing book if you're interested in product design and startups. And it's based on the idea that you want to, being lean is the idea that you don't need a beautifully designed app before you put it out there on the marketplace. You don't need a final product. You don't need it to be everything you always will ever want it to be. You just can get something out there and start getting feedback. And so especially in the app space, because apps are interesting. They provide this new venue for distribution, and you can iterate. Like, how often do you guys get updates for the apps on your phones? All the time, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's because the developers have changed something based on what you guys have been doing, and so, or improved something, ideally. Hopefully they've improved it. That's very different than making a film. A film is different. It has to be what it's going to be before you put it out there. I love the app space because you can learn from your users and keep changing it. So you start with an MVP, you put it out there, and then you iterate. So it's a process called build, measure, learn. So you build something, you put it out there, you measure how people are responding it, you take those learnings, and then you build it again. Or not build it again, but you iterate on it, you change it to adapt to what people are doing with it. So that, at a very high level, is how to build an app. Do you guys have any questions about this part?
What we're going to do is we're going to pause because the bell's going to go in like 30 seconds. Maybe a good time to